friends. I'm Fredrik Fexe, Executive Vice President of Business Sweden, and we are here to pioneer the possible to keep the 1.5 alive. It is a true pleasure to welcome you to this session with Robert Falck, CEO of Einride, on the topic of how will the future autonomous and electric transport system look like, and when can we get there? Can we get there by 2030? As we know, transportation is one of the key sectors in accelerating the climate transition toward the targets in the Paris Agreement. We expect electrification of transport to reduce carbon dioxide emissions by up to 90%. By combining electric transport with frontline autonomous technology, the future transportation system will not only be environmentally sustainable, but also have potential to substantially reduce the number of accidents and fatalities. But what does the road ahead look like to achieve the future autonomous and electric transport system? Can we get there? And these are some of the examples of questions that we will address in this session. Welcome to all of you. And Robert, welcome to you, especially since you are the key person here. Welcome to the Swedish Pavilion, where we pioneered the possible toward a fossil-free world. Now, Robert, how are you today?
I'm great. How about you? It's a pleasure to be here.
Fantastic. It's a pleasure to be here as well at COP26. First, Einride is such an amazing company and you do so much things that makes me go, wow. But a few words on what solutions and products do you actually provide today? I mean, you're moving so fast. Could you please enlighten us?
We started Einride with ambition to challenge the existing players and set a different narrative. If you go back to when we started in 2016, I think that no one said that electric was possible for heavy goods transport, that it was even possible to go electric or even feasible to go autonomous. But the technology is happening very fast. And for us, has always been the case that we wanted to challenge how the narrative and how the organization of the industry itself worked. And for us, that has been one of the main purposes. And I think it's quite marvelous now to be standing here and everyone agrees that electric is happening and that's the right way to go. If you go back just 2-3 years, it was a big debate of how we're going to solve this and a lot of narrative being upheld. And I like to think and hope that we have a little bit of reason why the world is moving in the right direction. And that was at least our ambition and intention when we started the company.
Now, how old is Einride?
We started in 2016, so we just had our 5th birthday party here a month ago.
Oh, splendid. It's fantastic to see. And only 5 years old. And yesterday we had a session here where you were one of the panelists with the heavyweight punchers with CEOs from Volvo and Scania. And it's impressive to see how you challenge.
Yeah, thank you. And I mean, we have an amazing team at Einride that has dedicated their lives to making this change happen. And I think that's very healthy that all existing systems get someone that challenges. I'm very humble and very aware of both our limits and challenges, but I think that, and something we always said with Einride, is that the idea that something else is doable and possible is much bigger, much more important than Einride itself. So even if the success of Einride is still up for the future to decide, but I think that the idea and the concept and what we have brought to the table is so strong and so lasting that what we see and what we've been pioneering is the future of the transport. And I'm glad that now the more and more people are starting to see that and also the potential of this technology. What really made me personally wanted to dedicate my life in making this happen was the fact that what we have with Einride is something so unique as a business case for reducing CO2 emission. If you combine autonomous and electric, and even just electric manual, you have a business case for the transition itself. That means that we can transition and let the market transition into the more sustainable alternative of the future. And what the only thing we need to do is to challenge and to challenge how it's been done for 100 years.
No, we clearly see the potential that you have and the technology that you provide, and we see clearly the potential of combining electrification and autonomous driving. But what do you see are the challenges in the transportation system to get there and to get there in time?
I think that I think the biggest challenge is the system itself. I think that we're all junkies when it comes to fossil fuel. I think we're all dependent on the fossil fuel economy. And a lot of the big players in the world and the big companies are based on fossil fuel. So the transitional change that we need to do and challenge ourselves, and also just being blunt, there are a lot of companies that needs to maybe go out of business. They need to be changed. There's a lot of change management needed to be done. All people employed in the fossil fuel industry, all the ones that produce diesel engines, all of that needs to change, and that's the challenge itself. We need to change ourselves. I think for my personal view is that we spend a little bit too much time pointing fingers and not enough time contributing to the change ourselves. And in the change, I'm not meaning that we should go back to the Stone Age. We need to bring more new technology, and the technology we need is already there. So for us, it's more about applying it and working very hard to change and attract the right people.
And you're going also, with Einride, you're going directly into the core of the transportation sector, where we have the heavy transport. And heavy transport is a heavy polluter as well. From your point of view, when you look on the alternative fuels, what is the best option in the perhaps short, medium and long-term perspective? What is the best option to go for when you look at alternative fuels?
I think there's only one option to go for. It is electric. And it's been very clear for 10 years. And the only reason why it hadn't happened faster is because that the current industry had a lot of incentives of upholding the existing both business model and technology. I think that something that we need to be aware of is that, for instance, the automotive industry and most of the bigger players that are currently in play, they need to do write-offs between 6 to 7 years of profit just to make this transition. If you look at big OEM players, manufacturer players, roughly 30 to 40% of the people employed are still focusing on developing diesel platforms, manufacturing diesel platforms. So we are very much locked into this current system. And to change that, we need to be aware of the challenges. And if I really have something that I hope is that we stop subsidizing both by legislation and direct subsidies of the existing system. And if we just flatten the competitive situation between the old and new current technologies, this transition will be very fast.
Yeah. Do you see, I mean, if we're going for battery, we need green energy, but we also need the charging infrastructure to be able to actually provide the green energy. What's your view on the charging infrastructure, the charging network? I mean, will we be able to, what hinders us to basically build that?
Nothing. I think that from my view is that the biggest challenge is that this is a highly regulated market, mostly dominated by both governmental players as well as big institutional companies. And I think that's the main challenge in this transition, because if you just look at the business case and the transitional opportunity that we have, without, so to say, the structures in place, this would happen already.
I will just have to ask you the question. I mean, what's your view on the price of setting a price on carbon dioxide?
Perfect.
Yeah. Good.
It's what should be done, and I think that's those kind of business work. Like, I'm a big fan from a macroeconomy perspective, is that you should reward or penalize things that have a harmful impact on the environment or society as a whole, rather than to steer the competitive landscape.
Now turning from reduction of carbon dioxide to reducing accidents and fatalities, I think the combination here is interesting. Now, how, from your point of view, how can the road-based transportation industry contribute to reducing accidents and fatalities?
I think that's back to a little bit of a fragmented market and how it's been historically addressed. I think that the autonomous technology at the core gives us an opportunity for collaboration, and that we should set standards for safety systems. For me, autonomous systems is not about making, I think there are a lot of debate on the trolley problem, which to learn a computer to make the best decision in a hard situation. But for me, that's not why I'm a big fan of autonomous. For me, autonomous and the technology, we can actually have the benefit of learning from each incident. With human drivers, we're bound to repeat the challenges or the mistakes because we don't learn from each other. In a way we do, but we will never be able to build a system based on man that are completely safe. And I think autonomous system is the only way that we're going to reach zero deaths in traffic ambition that we have in Sweden. And we should work together and force everyone in the automotive industry to work together to reach that standard. I mean, the approach has been extremely successful, for instance, in the commercial aviation industry. I mean, if you see that we are more people than ever traveling in skies, and in 2000, I think it was 17, was the first time that no one was killed in commercial flight. And that has been done through collaboration party and strict standards. And that's the potential we see for autonomous as well. That doesn't mean that we will not have incidents, but for every incident we can learn and predict and avoid it in the future. And that gives us literally the potential to save millions of lives yearly.
So is this the platform Saga? Is that what that is all about, to collect data and to provide better decision making for the transporter in how to actually operate?
For us, it's our operating system. It's I think that the current industry could be described as if you go back to the age of the mechanical typewriter. I think that's how we should describe the current truck industry or the automotive industry. It's mostly based on mechanical systems, and the diesel engine is more than 3,500 mechanical parts. And when you go electric and digital, that means that you need to have the software on top. So for us, the Saga platform is the operating system, just as Windows, for instance, is the operating system for electric calculators.
Interesting. And I also understand that, I mean, are your pods purely autonomous, or can I drive one, or is it possible to drive a pod?
It's yes and no. We don't have any driver seats in the vehicle itself, and I think that's something that we've been obvious for us to start. If you want to get the benefit of this technology, that you need to start there. And but we have pioneering a new type of job. I think that I'm a firm believer that sustainability is not just for the environment. We need to create also sustainable societies if we want to go forward. And something that I see going to be quite a big employer or big industry in the future is going to be remote drivers or remote truck operators. Because if you need to combine the benefit of autonomous with the strength of agility and decision making of humans, and with that we can get a much better and safer and more agile transport system than you would if you were going for only autonomous.
Considering that we have discussed electrification to reduce emissions and advanced sensor systems to save lives, do you see a way to simultaneously drive both targets? And I'm a little bit curious about the business case. It seems like heavy investments, and I mean, what does the actual business case look like for you? Is it good business, or is it pure that you want to go for go
I think
to.
what's
Yeah,
I think
sorry.
back to sorry, but I think something that's is very different for us than compared to the sort of say traditional truck manufacturers or the current existing industry. I mean, 85% of the market currently are owner operators, truck drivers that own small um, carrier company, then literally drive their own truck, and that's the biggest customer for all the OEMs. And that's why we have a big shortage of truck drivers globally, because that's not a very profitable business. If you compare it to, for instance, with the big OEMs, they have a margin of between, if you're best in class, you're maybe 7, 8. If you're on average, you're 5, 6. And that's quite good if you compare it to the owner operators, because they only have a profit to 1 to 2%. And those owner operators are the ones that currently owns all the diesel trucks out there. And if you want to make this transition happen, you also need to facilitate that change.
So interesting. Let's move on to the state of the industry and the potential institutional hurdles that we see. I mean, we see much promise has been put on digitalization, electrification, and automation, and that's some of the areas that we have touched upon right now. Now, how do you see these areas related to one another, and how can digitalization, electrification, and automation be combined to design a sustainable transportation system of tomorrow?
I think something that I think is very, very important in this transition, because it's so easy that and what we have done so far, to put it frank, is to uphold existing system. We have been discussing the climate for 30 years at least. And I think the major challenges is that we always tend to go back and ask the people that are actually causing the challenges. And I think that, for instance, I can just relate back to Sweden. Sweden is one of the biggest tech providers in the world for technology that emanates or generates CO2 emissions. If you look at the big Swedish export companies and one providing, I think there are Swedish produced technology in almost every diesel and or car engine in the world, with a few exceptions. But I would say that Swedish technology is contributing to more, I would estimate it somewhere between 15 to 20% of the global CO2 emissions. So Swedish engineers has a lot of responsibility in setting this straight.
That's a good tagline. I might quote you on that one. It's up to the to keep the 1.5 alive. It's up to the Swedish engineers.
Yeah.
And just looking at your standpoint toward the other companies in the field, in transportation companies or in the truck makers, what do you see? What do you see? Do you see that you have another vision, or do you see that all of you have the same vision of the future transportation system? And or is there a difference? I mean, why you have a lot of technology differences, but you also have another view on where we're going and how we're going there?
I think that for me, it's also why we started the company. I hope that Einride wouldn't be needed, but we are not the best, we're not the smartest, we are not even that good at times, and we have a lot of challenges, a lot of things to work with. But that still, we managed to be the first in the world to put an autonomous electric truck on the road. We currently have one of the biggest fleet of electric heavy trucks in Europe. We are the ones scaling the first size. We are deploying more than 500 vehicles in the coming year in North Europe and the US. And with that, we are literally pioneering and being the first to deploy it. And what we have that we've been lacking is the privilege of not having a legacy. We were started on the sole purpose to drive this change. And we have to understand that the industry has and makes a lot of profits. I mean, the current sales volume for electric trucks is 0. 100% of the trucks being sold today are diesel-based. And that's going to be a fact for quite a lot of years to come. And this transition has to happen fast. And I think that what we have to understand is the current players, the current industry, are making good money of upholding the existing market and structures. And to get that changed, they need to see a profitable way forward. And and that's the challenge we have. I mean, if of all the truck manufacturers in the world, no one is providing any electric trucks on volume before 2026 or 2027. And that's been a fact. And that's back to your question. What makes us different is that we don't have any business to uphold. And we are not afraid of making and going all in for the future because we don't have any business to lose.
What do you see? I mean, I can see that you're running faster, basically because you're not having a heritage and a rucksack filled with excellent revenues and good clients and business there. But what do you see that the industry or your competitors in one way? What do they need? Is it only guts, or do they need to look into their business models, or?
I think that they're doing the right things, but at the core, we need new players. We need new way of working. We need to allow new players, and I am very scared at the core of how, especially Europe, has a big challenge with the sometimes too close collaboration or relations between big companies and the state. Because that means that it also sometimes locks in competition and locks out competition, and it means that we tend to uphold the existing system rather than challenge it for the greater good of society.
Well, we are very happy to have you in our Pioneer the Fossil Free and Pioneer the Possible to keep the 1.5 alive program, along with Scania and Volvo as well. So we have three heavy punchers in developing new technology and pushing the industry ahead.
And just to put it very clear, we always consider both Scania and Volvo more of partners and potential collaborators. And for me, and why we are doing what we do, is to also help them to change and transition into the future.
That's a good point, very good point. I mean, we also see here at COP26 as one of the things coming forward is the collaborative approach and how we need to go downstreams and upstream and sidestream in the value chain. Now we do have high expectations on the negotiations. We don't really get much information. We got a few things that perhaps Article 6 is moving ahead a little bit. But from your point of view, what would be the best outcome from the negotiations here in Glasgow for the transportation system? It's the transportation day-to-day.
I would say that the best we could do is to start to level the playing field. It's to stop subsidizing existing system. We've been investing in the existing system for more than 100 years. And we still have a lot of incentives. We still have a lot of effort in upholding an existing system. And legislation, for instance, we put longer and longer trucks on the roads in Sweden, for instance. And with that, which makes it very, very hard to go electric, for instance. And that's a way to uphold existing structures. And those kind of legislation, I think we should, and if this conference can really add something, is to have a global challenge to stop subsidizing and to go through legislation that upholds existing systems.
Yeah, I hope that you will be right in that. Now, yesterday, we have a few days to go. On Friday, we will know. Yesterday, you got the question, I mean, who would you like to be stuck in an elevator with? And your pick was Greta. Now, today, you can add another person. So you will be 3 in that elevator. Who would you pick and what would you discuss?
Oh, that's a good question. And you got me there. I'm not sure about that one, actually. I think that at the core, we need to have more people that think that we can solve, and I mean, the best days of mankind are still to come. And we should not forget that. We are beating world poverty. We are starting to address the climate change. And the next step for us is also to, as mankind, to figure out what are we going to do next. Because I mean, we're going to solve this. It's going to be painful, but I'm very firm believer that mankind would rise and to this challenge and make this change happen. And I think that in 20 years, and we will discuss also how we're going to start to leave this planet and take our exploration as mankind to the next planet. And so I mean, it's our best days of mankind is still to come.
So perhaps you should invite Gene Roderick, Captain Kirk from Star Trek, who was recently in space.
Yeah, that was amazing.
Splendid. Thanks a lot, Robert, for an interesting conversation. It's highly. I get a lot of energy to listen to you, and I also like that this challenger position that you take to transform the transportation system. And we are happy to have you in our team in the Pioneer the Fossil Free and Pioneer the Possible to keep 1.5 alive. And thank you very much, Robert. And thank you very much.
It was a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
And thank you very much to all of you listening. See you later. Take care. Bye-bye.